Radio Glamorgan.
Hello, I'm Julie Kissick and you're listening to the podcast version of a programme that I produced for International Women's Day 2025. It was broadcast on Radio Glamorgan on Saturday, March the 8th, and the full version with music is still available via the station's rewind service on the website and the app for 14 days. This is what I'm going to call the minus the music version. I'm hoping you're here for the empowering, inspirational conversations that I've had with two incredible women. The first one, Rhian Mannings, is a woman who suffered more heartache than most of us could ever imagine, and was somehow able to channel her pain into something positive by founding To Wish, a charity which helps those who've experienced the sudden loss of a child. Her story is about death and unimaginable grief, but also a determination and drive to make a difference.
When I lost George, Paul and I both felt very abandoned. We felt very alone. And then when I lost Paul, the feelings of loneliness and isolation are huge. And those feelings actually haunt me more now, really, than actually feeling sad. Because you think that you did something wrong and maybe you were a bad person because no one wanted to support you. So what we want families to know is that they're not alone, and we want them to know that there is no right or wrong way of dealing with this.
My other guest is Vanessa Wadden, founder of Hope Rescue, which has been saving, supporting and rehoming discarded and abandoned dogs for more than 2 decades.
What drives me is that longer term change. We've got to look at what's upstream. We can't just keep taking dogs in. We've really got to tackle the bigger problems in animal welfare, whether that is campaigning for an end to greyhound racing, whether it's looking for improved breeding regulations, whether it's looking for better dog control. So much to do that's actually going to make a difference, tackling those real root causes.
I'll also be sharing the words of wisdom that come courtesy of some of my dear girlfriends. The United Nations theme for International Women's Day this year is for all women and girls: rights, equality and empowerment. We'll be embracing those words and celebrating some inspirational women over the course of this podcast. And I hope you don't mind, but I'm dedicating this programme to Millie, who tragically is no longer with us, but is always in our hearts. And to her incredible mother Liz, who's navigating the saddest and most disorientating experience of loss with fortitude and with grace.
You're listening to Radio Glamorgan.
Now, if you're a regular listener to the station, you'll usually hear me on a Friday evening or a Saturday morning between 6 and 7 with the sports show. But today I'm not talking sport, but I am talking to some truly incredible women. 13 years ago, my first guest, Rhian Mannings, was a wife, a mother to 3 children and a secondary school teacher. But all that changed when she became a bereaved mother and a widow. Rhian's is a story of incredible loss, but from it came a charity which has offered support to thousands in the most difficult time of their lives. It's a painful story, of course, but it's also one of resilience, determination, compassion and kindness. Here's Rhian to explain how To Wish began.
So the charity started due to personal experiences. So in 2012, my 1-year-old son, George, died very suddenly in a local A&E department. And the staff who worked with us were absolutely amazing, but it was clear very quickly that they were not equipped in any way to look after the family, especially when you leave your child who's just passed away that you never expected to lose, and you don't receive any support or hear from anyone. 5 days after George died, my husband, Paul, took his own life. He just blamed himself. He was just absolutely devastated by what happened. He felt he should have been able to do more as a father. And my other two children, who were 2 and 3 at the time, and I were left to try and rebuild our lives. I was a PE teacher when this all happened, and I did try and go back to work, and I did love my job, but I worked in a cathedral school where the funeral was, where our wedding was, where the children were christened, and it just was just too close to home. So I just thought I'd set up something very small, perhaps a bit of a hobby to keep me sane, something positive to support families who lose a child unexpectedly. And the rest is history. It's something now that I'm extremely passionate about and has grown into something huge.
Your experience is absolutely awful, and I'm sure that everybody that listens, their heart will go out to you.
Thank you.
So many people crumble after that sort of devastation to their families. Where did you find the strength to do something as positive as you have done?
The answer is I don't know. So I've always been a very emotional person. When this happened, I generally didn't know how I was going to survive, let alone move forward. But I was just determined, really, that George and Paul needed to live on, that we as a family had been failed, and that, we should have been supported in some way after George died. We were given phone numbers that didn't even exist anymore for support. So I just felt that every morning when I woke up, I wanted to make a difference in their memory. And actually that massively helped me go forwards. I had 2 other children, and yes, that was a big focus for me. But I used to call myself a double mum, not a single mum, wasn't what I signed up for. And I actually at times found it really difficult, and just almost a reminder of what I'd lost as well, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Your children were very young, weren't they? I would imagine that they found the whole experience very difficult, and you must have found it very difficult too, because as an adult you will grieve the loss of your husband and your little boy in a different way to a 2 and 3-year-old.
Yeah, so no one gives you any kind of advice or support on how to explain to a 2 and 3-year-old what's happened, and actually we couldn't understand what had happened as adults. So how do you? It's almost trial and error. Parenting is trial and error anyway, and we just were very honest from day one. So when anything was asked, even though I wasn't telling them the whole truth, I never lied to them and just built up to what genuinely did happen. We kept routine going for the children, but they were only 2 and 3. It's very, very young, and a lot of the memories they have today are memories that I've given them through reminders and experiences that I shared with Paul and George back then.
So how do you go from being a grieving wife, a grieving mother, to being the CEO of a charity that then helps people who have been through things that are very similar to you? To some people, that would feel like you're constantly ripping off a Band-Aid.
Yeah, and a lot of people ask me that, and actually it doesn't make me feel sad. If anything, it gives me hope for the future, that families are getting the support they deserved, unlike ours. I didn't have a clue what I was doing when I set up the charity. As I said, it was never supposed to become a big charity, ever. So I literally just started driving around hospitals and police forces and just speaking to people who were involved in sudden child death and asking them what their experiences were like, and were there things out there that perhaps we missed. But when I heard that there was nothing for sudden death, that's what just got me going forward and wanting to help other people. So I absolutely love my job. I love what I do, even though the subject matter is not only difficult, but it does remind me of what's happened to me in the past. But actually the positivity that comes through our organisation, through my team, through our incredible families, siblings, that's what helps me. And it actually does help me with my own grief as well. So no, it is difficult at times if there's families who've lost perhaps under sudden circumstances, like in different ways, perhaps similar ways to what I've lost, then that does remind me a little bit. It's quite close to home. And I don't have a lot of direct. So I go to all the events, so I see families all the time, but I don't go to any kind of specific bereavement support events, because I feel I don't want families to feel that I'm the person there to support them when my team are there instead, if you see what I mean.
So you are very much the driving force, the organizer, and the person who is the link person, I guess, who puts those people in place who are equipped to help the people that are going through the difficulties.
Yeah. So I've got a team now of nearly 40 members of staff dotted around Wales and in the expansion areas, which are the bordering counties of Wales. I've got over 150 counsellors and therapists who work alongside us to support families. I coordinate from a CEO level. I'm a lot more operational than a lot of CEOs because I love organising and I love being out with everybody possible. But then I've got some amazing sort of team leaders and managers. Yeah, I think you used the word force. I think my team see me coming when I open my office door with an idea. I think they hide under the desks, but it is a really, truly a massive team effort now. And I'm very, very lucky to have such an incredible team working with me.
And how unique is the charity?
Very. We have two sides to the charity, really. We have the ongoing support of counselling and therapy, which isn't new. There are hundreds of organisations that offer similar things, not specifically to suddenly bereaved families, but there are counselling services available. But what we have that makes us unique is an immediate support pathway. So we have actual agreements in place with every health board we work, every police force we work, to make sure that if a family do go through a sudden loss of their child, they can actually be referred into us at the time of death. And we then promise to phone the family within 48 hours. I don't agree with giving a leaflet to a family and expecting them to ring us. What happens is, as long as the family consent, that the police officer or the healthcare worker ring us, tell us what's happened, and we ring them. And I know that's unique because I do a lot of work all over the UK, but I've also spoken on international conferences where there is nothing like us in the world. So we are really proud of that service, and we just want to make sure it's the best service it can be.
As Rhian explained, specialist support was sadly lacking when she and her husband Paul lost their 1-year-old son George. The subsequent double tragedy compounded the devastation that she and her family felt, and ultimately it motivated Rhian to want to make sure others didn't go through those feelings of isolation that she went through after the loss of her little boy. Her Two Wish charity is now available to everyone who wants their support, which is offered as a matter of course to anyone experiencing the sudden death of a child. Rhian says the option of support is crucial at a time when life feels so difficult to navigate.
We offer memory boxes for the families in the hospital, and that's often where that conversation happens. Majority of families say yes to a memory box, but there is a small proportion who say no to us having that referral. So what the staff are trained to do then in the hospitals is to give our information, and the families can come back to us. When we ring the family, more often than not, they agree to a home visit and to have a phone call with us. If they don't, we will ring them back within a week. And if they still don't need our support or don't want our support, we'll send them all the information out. We can always guarantee the majority will come back to us at some point. But I think it's so important that people understand that everyone grieves differently. Everybody grieves at different rates and in different ways. And it's so important that the options are there. So if we go out to a family, we will offer them a variety of different support, from group support, individual support. Coming to our events is a form of support for families where you don't talk about what's happened, but people in the room have been through similar things. Counselling, reflexology, we offer a combination. But we also work with other organisations we would support someone who lost a child in a road traffic accident because it was a sudden death. But there are organisations specifically out there who support road traffic victims. So we would give them immediate support, but then if they wanted more specific support, we then link up with other organisations. I'm all for partnership working.
Tell me a little bit then about the process that someone would go through if they decided to take you up on your offer of support. What kind of conversations would you have with parents going through this?
So we'd go out to the home very early on. And a lot of it's just listening. What we like to stress is these are not counsellors. This part of my team are not counsellors or trained counsellors. These are people who've got experience of working with people who are going through some really difficult times, who will go out and listen, who may give practical support and advice. And counselling at that time is not beneficial. A lot of families are desperate, and that's what they say. We want counselling, we want counselling. It's not going to solve anything at that time. It never will. But even when you are early in the journey, you just need someone to be there for you. We then offer them a variety of different support mechanisms, which they can opt for or not. They can disengage and come back, anything along those lines. But I think the main thing families want to know is that they're not alone. Because when I lost George, Paul and I both felt very abandoned. We felt very alone. And then when I lost Paul, the feelings of loneliness and isolation are huge. And those feelings actually haunt me more now, really, than actually feeling sad. Because you think that you did something wrong and maybe you were a bad person because no one wanted to support you. So what we want families to know is that they're not alone, and we want them to know that there is no right or wrong way of dealing with this. And preparing them for some of these situations that you mentioned. We use elephants at the charity a lot because elephants never forget, but also the subject of death, and child death especially, is that elephant in the room that no one wants to talk about. And I was ignored and avoided for years in the supermarkets. You know, it's something I vividly remember. I cannot hand on heart ever admit I've never avoided somebody I knew because you're worried of saying the wrong thing. But actually saying nothing is far, far worse. And it's just acknowledging that you're aware of what's happened, saying the child's name out loud because it means that they're living on. It's just being there. You know, some of my friends said nothing, but came. Some of my friends dropped food. Some of my friends were just there. And they're the ones that are still here today. But you do lose a lot of people. You know, I lost my best friend when this happened. They couldn't cope and walked away. And I don't really know why. I'm guessing it was because she found it very difficult.
People then expect you to get back to normal, and you've got to find a new normal. And what does that new normal look like? And often we don't want to accept that new normal, do we? No. And we kick against it.
Yeah, and that new normal is very tricky because I think you've got to get on and with your life because you do, but you also don't want to. So you're being pulled in two different directions of how do you move forward without just existing. You know, you do need to live a life, and I had to live a life because of Holly and Isaac. But you know, there's people who expect you to keep going, but then you do have people who traditionally think you should be mourning forever. So, you know, I was a 32-year-old who literally didn't leave the house for nearly a year at all. And then when you start going out, you know, and having that one glass of wine, you feel very guilty, and you're looking around to see who's watching you because should you be smiling and should you ever be happy again? And I was really fortunate that 5 years ago or 6 years ago, I remarried, and you know, I was very comfortable with that. And actually, Paul and George were part of that wedding day in little sort of subtle ways. And my husband is very understanding. But I also know that there will have been people. So I know somebody came up to me not long ago, actually, and said, can I ask you a really personal question? And you're thinking, yep, okay, where's this going? I'm used to it by now. How do you love somebody else? Because I couldn't ever imagine loving anyone if anything happened to my husband. Now, the nice part of me was very much trying to explain, and the other part thought, well, I hope you never have to find out, because until it happens to you, you never know. If you'd have told me this was going to happen to me before it did, I would never have believed I would have survived a day, let alone 13 years. So, you know, never judge people. And I think it changes you in a way as well that nothing much else could do in the same way. So I think I've always been a nice person, and I've always been a kind person. I don't know if I've ever been as tolerant and as understanding, because for me now, none of us know how the other person feels. They may show that they're doing well and they're not doing well. And I think, you know, we need as a nation really, and as communities, just to be that bit understanding and kind when it comes to other people.
So what would you say to people who maybe are the kind of people that you described earlier, you know, the kind of people that feel very uncomfortable if they see someone who's been recently bereaved? You're doing your shopping or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
I often find myself, I'm really good at sending WhatsApp messages. I'll often message people who are going through a hard time or a bereavement and say, how are you
Yeah.
doing today? Often what comes back is, oh, not too bad, or okay. And then it's almost like the conversation has
Yeah.
nowhere else to go.
Yeah. And there's a fine line, isn't there? And remember, some people will not want you to say that much. Yeah, and some people will. So it's very, very difficult to get that balance right. I think you've said something that a lot of people said to me. They'd message me and go, I hope you're okay. Or are you okay? Or can I do anything for you? And then you always will go back with, no, I'm fine. Or yeah, I'm okay. You know, I can remember seeing someone not so long ago who I know has been through a really difficult time, and I've gone, hey, how you doing? When you know straight away they're really not doing very well. So it's just trying to phrase some of those things and leave it, rather than saying, do you want me to go to the shops for you? Because 9 times out of 10, people are going to say, I'm fine. Rather than saying, right, I'm in Tesco's now, I'm going to pick you up a pint of milk and some bread. Is there anything else I can get you? And I'll leave it on your doorstep. You know, a lot of people were very brave and knocked on my front door. I think that would have been hard for me to do, but no one wanted to come in. Nobody wanted to stay long. They just knocked and said, if you need anything, you know, we're here, or just really sorry to hear what you're going through. There's no point coming on to someone and starting to cry yourself and then making everything, you know, awful. And I did that a lot. You become a counsellor in your own way sometimes by supporting other people. But it's just a glance or a touch of the arm or, you know, something to acknowledge, you know. But yeah, it's hard because everyone is so different.
For a charity like To Wish, tragedy and heartache are the link between it and the people it exists to support. But even in those incredibly difficult times, Rhian says there's a lot of positivity and gratitude. And her ultimate message is one of hope.
Couple of things I can remember. I had 2 little girls. They were about 4 or 6, and they sold homemade lemonade in their garden. They had matching lemon dresses on, and they raised, I can't remember how much they raised, you know, not loads. And they wanted to come and meet me at the office and give me the money. That just means the world to know that people support our organisation, but children are learning about our organisation and knowing what we do and almost starting just to talk about those little taboo subjects. I've then got 2 elderly ladies who are in their 80s who every year just set up a cake stall in their front garden in memory of their granddaughter. And I went to meet them a few weeks ago and they made me To Wish cupcakes and we drank tea. Again, you know, it's nothing big, but for me, things like that mean so much more. And then you have letters. I've had letters from several dads who've just said to me, please don't be angry with your husband because I have been to that point, and because of To Wish, I didn't go any further, but he must have been so desperate. They mean the absolute world to me because I'll never understand that. And people who, you know, other men may understand exactly how he was feeling. But then you have big things like we've had, you know, I was adamant that the question of support should be a mandatory question in Wales. I truly believed that it wasn't down to the staff to remember to ask the question to a family, do you want support? So I fought it through as a petition. It got debated, eventually got accepted. So in Wales, health professionals have to ask if a family, when they lose a child or young adult, wants support. And that's a huge, huge breakthrough. But all of the examples truly mean the same because it's those little things. And I'm at events all the time and just seeing parents who are further on their, on their journey is what keeps me going every day.
Yes, I mean, as I said right at the start of the conversation, it's life-changing, isn't it, for so many people? And your life changed in a really negative way. And the fact that you've been able to pull that round and do something incredibly positive, not just for your own family, but for so many other families, is quite remarkable. So what do you do as a woman and as a CEO? It's International Women's Day. That the whole purpose of the programme is to celebrate women like you and your achievements. What do you do for downtime?
My husband probably argue that I don't really take any downtime. Although, like most women who are working, who are perhaps mums as well, it's hard, isn't it? I do love exercising when I get time. I love setting myself challenges to work towards. It's something that's really kept me going, is having these challenges. I love spending time with the kids, my friends, having fun. I think when you lose people that you love so much, you want to live a life for them as much as yourself, and you want to appreciate things that they can never appreciate again. So I do a lot outdoors. Yeah, I'm not a relaxer, and a spa day is probably one of the worst things that I could imagine, really. But I am a bit of a doer, and that's fine. That's what I do to unwind, really.
And what about music?
Not that much. It's weird. So I've never been musical myself, and I was never really into music before, apart from the boy band phases, as a lot of women my age were. When you do lose a loved one, music becomes more important to you. I think you learn and listen to the lyrics, and a song you thought was something that not related to what you were going through starts, and you listen to the lyrics when you're doing your shopping or something, it just kicks you and hits you hard. But, there are special pieces of music now that mean a lot to me.
Can you tell me a little bit about your 2 song choices?
Yeah, okay. So they're both for pretty sad reasons, but mean a real lot to me. So the first one is You Raised Me Up. It's a bit of a corny one, and I think it got played a lot in the end because it was covered by Westlife. But I always loved the original, and we had it sung by choristers when Paul and I got married in the cathedral. I taught the choristers, and they came and sang, and it was a really beautiful moment. And we had it sung at the funeral as well. So it's a song, the words are really appropriate, but also it's all about challenging yourself a little bit as well, and moving mountains, which is something that I like to do when I go walking and so on. So that's my first one. And then my second song is You'll Never Walk Alone. Again, lots of story to this. So Paul was a massive, massive Liverpool fan, travelled the world following them, absolutely loved them. And when we got married, I persuaded him to have a Ronan Keating soppy song as our first dance. But then when it started, I'd actually arranged for it to be You'll Never Walk Alone. And he actually thought that his mates had stitched us up and had changed it without me knowing. So when I'd calmed him down from this massive panic, obviously it was a really special moment. And at the funeral, we had it played as well. And my late husband's best friend read some of the lyrics as part of the funeral as well. So yeah, both of them are huge songs in my life, but actually they don't make me sad anymore. So they're actually on my running playlists, which people think is completely crazy, but I find running quite hard. So when I have these music, it just reminds me really of the past and keeps me going.
And what about women in your life? Who have been the influential women?
So again, it's a bit predictable, but my mum is my hero. My sister's my hero. We were very, very, very close before the boys died anyway, but my mum and dad then moved in with us. My mum is just a phenomenal woman who I'm very, very close to. And my sister, again, we call ourselves the 3 witches on our WhatsApp group, but we are inseparable. I've got my daughter then, who is obviously only 17, but obviously I admire her for what she's been through. I think it's really hard to grow up when such difficult things have happened, but I'm so in awe of how she's coped with it. Got A stars across the board for her GCSEs. She dances beautifully, and all of these things that she still had stuff going on in her life that could have held her back. So yeah, and then in the sort of wider world, I'm a huge fan of the royals. Princess Catherine is somebody I admire massively, especially over the last 12 months. I've been fortunate to meet her several times. She lives in a goldfish bowl while being so sort of amazing with it. So she's one of my massive idols, really, and role models. And actually, anyone who's juggling, I get to meet amazing nurses and police officers and full-time mums and just people who are balancing life and still smiling. And I think all women deserve a big shout out, really.
Now, we all know how tough it is in the current economic climate, and the charity sector is certainly feeling it. But as Rhian said earlier, giving something back isn't always about raising huge amounts of money. Sometimes it's about being a part of something significant, because you are someone that by being there can make a difference.
So Tuish are always looking for volunteers, and we're always looking for people to fundraise for us, not about raising loads of money, but to wear our shirt if they're running or cycling to raise awareness of our organisation. But if you go to our website, number 2, tuish.org.uk, everything about volunteering, everything about our support and where we're working at the moment. We're not working in the whole of England yet. There is plans. We've got a plan for that. If you want to look at our events and any opportunities, it's all on there. And then you can contact us through the website. But, please just go away and follow our journey on social media. We're very present on social media, and just be part of our journey. It would really mean a lot to us.
And do you get volunteers who come to you not because they've had similar experiences, but just because they're inspired by what you do?
Oh, so many amazing volunteers. Yes, we do get bereaved families being part of our volunteering, but we just got people who just want to give back to the community. They can see what we do. They see our events. They can see that we are a special group of people and want to be part of that. So no, it's not just that. Businesses, we have a lot of corporates who like to give back a day, and they do things for us as well. So there's many, many ways in getting involved in the organisation and training. There's people out there who perhaps run businesses who can't financially support charities, but actually are really good at, Instagram, and can give us some free training. So yeah, many, many ways in getting involved. So please reach out.
I'm incredibly grateful to Rhian for sharing her story of loss and of love, which gave her the strength and the courage to make sure others didn't feel as isolated and lonely as she did when tragedy struck her family.
You're listening to your award-winning station,
Radio Glamorgan.
Here for you, all day, every day.
Now, I promised you some words of wisdom, courtesy of some of my friends, and I'm about to share the thoughts of 2 of them. But before I do, I'm going to read you the words sent to me from Vera, another dear friend, who wrote, "I wanted to say, learn to say no more often. Rely on yourself. Be independent. Stop worrying about what you look like and be happy within yourself. Learn to take time for you." Vera and Jill and Suzanne, who you're about to hear from, responded to a request from me to offer either their younger selves and or you, our listeners, the benefits of their life experiences. And this is what they had to share. Starting with Jill, a freelance director and choreographer, and the owner of Cats Theatre School in Swansea.
So my advice would be to seek a career in an area that brings you joy naturally, that you love doing, because you're going to spend most of your time doing it. And that then you can bring your own kind of passion to that work. And also, a little bit of advice would be to remember that offence, to take offence or give offence, is an action. So you can choose not to give it, and you can definitely choose not to take it. And your life will be full of so much more joy than carrying around a lot of bitterness and resentment. So yeah, just think about that.
Hi, I'm Suzanne, a retired nurse of 40 years. In school, I only achieved 4 O-levels as I didn't work hard enough. When I applied for nursing in 1986, I wish I had tried harder. However, I went on to do my SCN nurse training and qualified in 1988. Later years, I did my nursing degree and a degree in cancer care. I achieved a 2-1, plus many more qualifications. I went to Toronto, Canada, and Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, during my career, where I spoke in big nursing conferences. So my message is, don't think you can't do it, because you can.
I'm very fortunate to have got to an age where the female relationships in my life are probably the most significant they've ever been. Vera, Jill and Suzanne are all school friends of mine. When we hit the big 4-0, we organised a reunion, and we've met up regularly ever since, several times a year. Naturally, you maintain closer ties with some friends than you do with others, but there's something incredibly uplifting about being among women who just get you, regardless of how long you've known one another. Later in the podcast, we'll hear from a former BBC colleague of mine, Sarah Starling. Sarah will be putting the case for International Women's Day, which in her and my opinion has a significant role to play, even in 2025. You might not know Sarah's name, but I'm pretty sure you're going to know her voice. She's not a Radio Glamorgan volunteer, but I hear her regularly on the station, and many others. All will be revealed shortly.
On air, all day, every day. Broadcasting from the largest hospital in Wales. We are Radio Glamorgan.
I'm Julie Kissick, and I'm so pleased to be marking International Women's Day with this podcast, which helps celebrate some of the exceptional women who are doing incredible things for humans and for animals. And in this part of the podcast, we'll be hearing from Vanessa Wadden, the founder and the CEO of Hope Rescue, one of the charities which looks after stray and abandoned dogs across South Wales.
Going back to 2004, I read a really distressing newspaper article about a greyhound called Last Hope. The greyhound had been found on Vaucru Mountain. He'd had his ears cut off because that's how you identify them. They have tattoos in their ears. He'd been shot with a captive bolt gun in an attempt to kill him, but he was still alive and his tail was wagging. That story upset me so much, and it was almost a catalyst. Rather than just thinking, gosh, that's terribly sad, I thought, that is awful, but I need to do something about that. What can I do? I saw someone was asking for people to go to the court case. They found out who the perpetrator was. And I thought, yeah, I can go and do a little protest outside court. There I met the founder of Greyhound Rescue Wales and the founder of Greyhound Action. I started to really learn about how awfully greyhounds were treated in the racing industry. So I started to volunteer and do a bit of campaigning, going to protests, etc. But through that work, I also found out how many stray dogs were being euthanised in council pounds at that time, and it was well over 10,000 a year. That horrified me, and it was due to just a lack of a home for those stray dogs. So I started helping to find rescue spaces for those dogs in the pounds. So we weren't taking them in, but we would go into the pounds, see the dogs that were due to be destroyed that week, and then find a rescue that could take them. And through that work, we then set up Hope Rescue. And I named Hope Rescue after that first greyhound, Last Hope, that really inspired me to get into be more involved in animal welfare.
And how did you make the jump from being someone who wanted a campaign and wanted to do something positive to having a site as you have and a centre and the sort of contacts that you've been able to build over the years and obviously now being the CEO of the charity?
It's been a long journey. So when I set the rescue up, I was actually an asset management surveyor for a local authority, so I had a full-time job. We built the rescue up bit by bit. We had lots of volunteers in the beginning, and then we finally became a registered charity in 2009. Then we were able to take on our first employee. We used commercial boarding kennels and foster homes at that point, so I was working full-time for local authority still. Then in 2016, or 2015 actually, in 2015, I'd had enough of working in local government. It was really difficult. I wasn't enjoying it. After 26 years, I took the decision to take voluntary redundancy. Sadly, 3 days after I did that, my mum was diagnosed with a brain tumour. But I had quite a good redundancy package from the council. So I went home back to Eastbourne to look after mum until she sadly passed away 11 months later. But during that time, that gave me the space to actually think about what I wanted to do with Hope Rescue, where I wanted it to go. And I spent that year, I did some consultancy work for the Blue Cross, but I also managed to write the business plan for us to purchase our own centre, because that was the next logical move. It was really hard working from commercial boarding kennels, foster homes only. The logistics of it all was very difficult. We were lucky then to secure a mortgage to purchase the centre that we're in now. Sadly, mum didn't survive long enough to actually see it, but she knew we'd secured the mortgage, which was wonderful. And then in March 2017, we bought the centre, and it's all changed since then. The centre's been transformational for us. This year, we're on target to have 1,000 dogs through our doors. But as you said, what really gets me out of bed is that long-term change, tackling the issues at core. We have the most fabulous team here at the centre. I don't need to worry about the welfare of the dogs. They do that for me. They are incredible. what drives me is that longer term change. We've got to look at what's upstream. We can't just keep taking dogs in. We've really got to tackle the bigger problems in animal welfare, whether that is campaigning for an end to greyhound racing, whether it's looking for improved breeding regulations, whether it's looking for better dog control. So much to do that's actually going to make a difference, tackling those real root causes.
And as you say, education is really the key, isn't it? It's making people aware that you can't have dogs that are not neutered, and you have to be responsible when you make a decision to take a dog on, that this is a 15, sometimes 20-year commitment. And as I know from my own personal experience, often incredibly expensive.
Our Hope in the Community programme we launched last year is very much about that. It's about promoting responsible dog ownership in the community. It's also about supporting owners before they reach that crisis point, and seeing what we can do. So we're incredibly proud of that Hope in the Community programme. That is our strategic response to some of these larger welfare issues. We've only got a certain capacity here at the centre. We can't help every dog, so we do think it's really important to work in our local communities to show what responsible dog ownership looks like. And then, sadly, some people's circumstances do change through no fault of their own, and we do want to be there to help those owners. Those owners love their pets, they want to keep their pets, so that work is really important to us. We have over 200 requests to take in dogs every month. That's on top of taking a third of all the unclaimed stray dogs in Wales, and we also work supporting animal licensing Wales and licensing authorities with taking in dogs that have been seized from illegal breeders. We can't do it all. We have to prioritise, and that does lead to some frustration. I think, again, that's where the Hope in the Community programme comes in, that actually, do you actually need to give your dog up? Could we support you to be able to keep that dog? Do you just need some financial support with vet bills? Do you need some support with food through a pet food bank? So I think that's where that comes in, to try and help some of those owners. But we have very limited resources. We haven't got an infinite number of kennels here. At any one time we have between 150 to 200 dogs. That is it. We work incredibly hard to bring in the money needed to support the rescue. We have to raise over £2 million every year. We cannot do it all. And I think sometimes it is hard when people don't understand that and they have unrealistic expectations. We don't get any government funding as such. We have to earn every penny that comes in, and we do that through fundraising, through our charity shops, through our stray dog contracts. It's hard. We're running a business as well as running a charity, and I think sometimes that's forgotten. We're very much a community-based rescue, and we have built up the most tremendous network of community supporters. They really help us to deliver our work on a daily basis, whether it's financial donations, whether it's volunteering, whether it's fostering, whether it's helping us through our charity shops. Every single one of those supporters is helping us to deliver the impact that we are doing every day, and we absolutely could not do our work without that generous support.
So tell me a little bit about Vanessa beyond the CEO.
I live on site at the moment. We are in the process of purchasing a house off site that needs a lot of refurbishment from head to toe. So that's going to be my next project. I've lived on site for 7 years. It's really hard. It's 24/7. You never get away with it. The rescue operates 365 days a year. It's important that I find downtime. So I love going to see musicals. I like travelling as well. I've travelled all over the world. Going on holiday is the only way I can physically take that time out, and we do need that time out. Doing this work is relentless. It is difficult. We see some very upsetting and distressing cases, and it is important to try and get that work-life balance, but that is difficult living on site. So looking forward to refurbishing the house. That's needed from top to bottom, so that's going to be a good challenge.
So musicals is one of your outlets, and I've asked you to choose 2 songs for us. So tell us about one of them.
So This Is Me I've chosen from The Greatest Showman. Even though I'm a CEO, I didn't come the traditional route. I'm a founder CEO, so I haven't worked my way up through different charities or organisations. So sometimes I can have a bit of imposter syndrome. Whilst I brought financial skills, strategic skills, project management skills to the role, sometimes I do get a bit of imposter syndrome and I think, gosh, this is all just too much. But what I think I also bring is authenticity. And I think This Is Me does describe how I feel sometimes. Like, well, no, actually, I haven't gone the traditional route, but I am authentic. I'm able to talk about the problems and the issues in the animal welfare sector because I see it on a daily basis. I'm not a big corporate CEO. I'm not in an office miles away from what's actually happening on the ground. And I think that makes a difference in being able to tell our story and, you know, some of the work I do to get that legislative change, because I see it firsthand. So I think this is me, describes really, who I am. So my second song choice is from my absolute favourite musical, Les Miserables. It's One Day More. I'm actually going to London for the Association of Chief Executive and Voluntary Organisations, and I'm meeting up with another CEO, and we're going off to see Les Miserables. So I absolutely love that. I just think it's uplifting, it's inspiring. So yes, that's my time out.
Radio Glamorgan.
My thanks to Vanessa for sharing her story. Many of us are guilty of stagnating or wondering if we ought to just make a change and go for what we know we want instead of waiting for the perfect time. And we all know that perfect time never really exists, don't we? Well, a current colleague and another long-time friend of mine, Dr. Elizabeth Lloyd-Parks, has recorded a list of wise words that she'd like to share in the hope that some will be just what you need to hear today.
Slow down. Be present in the moment. Today is what's important. Try again. Be tenacious. Be that warrior. Be proud of yourself. Give more. As much and as often as you can. Say thank you more. Speak your truth. Integrity is admirable. Love to the utmost. Love without fear. Love unconditionally. Invest in friends. Good friends listen, don't take advantage, nor let you down. Be the same. Friendship is a two-way street and the ultimate gift. Look after yourself, heart, body and soul. You deserve it. Dump the guilt. It's not productive. Love your aging body. It's a sign that you've lived. Believe in yourself. If you don't, nobody else will.
That self-belief eludes many of us at various times of our lives. But even at our weakest, when we struggle to put one foot in front of another, when we can summon it, it helps us get through. That's one of the messages my friend radio presenter Helen Enser-Morgan wants to share with us today. Helen's words come courtesy of lived experience and wisdom gained from the school, sometimes of hard knocks.
If I was to write a note to my younger self, or maybe to young girls today, the most important thing that I would want to say is that do what makes you happy. And I think growing up in the era that I grew up in, many women were told that not to expect too much, don't achieve, don't go for things as much, you probably won't get it. And I think over the last few decades, women have constantly broken through that glass ceiling that was set. And I love seeing young women thrive. And so many young women I see now, they don't have that fear of worrying about that glass ceiling or not doing things. They have that ability to just go for it. And I would say do that. And many people, I think, get confused about like feminism or what women should do as in work or maybe doing something that's amazing. But it's about doing something that fills your heart with joy. So if it is being a CEO, then that's what you should go for. If it is about being something creative, a singer, an artist, a poet, that's what you should do. Maybe your dream has been to have children and be a mum and raise children to be really great human beings, then there's nothing wrong with that either. And I think that's what's important, is doing what speaks to you, not what other people are pressuring you to do, doing what you feel is best for you. I think it's so important to do that now, especially considering in some parts of the world now there are so many, women who are constantly told what they can and can't wear, and women are told, what's happening in America. They don't have control over their own reproductive organs, which I think is atrocious. And I think it's so important to try and break through as much as possible and be the voice for other women. Stand up and be strong, do the things you want to do. And another thing I would say is not to seek approval from others, because I think sometimes when we're younger, we want people to love us or like us, and we want their approval. And this is something maybe it's something that comes with age. I no longer seek people's approval. I no longer care if someone likes me. If someone doesn't like me, then it's not the end of the world, where when I was younger, everybody had to like me. And I would say to a younger person, learn to love yourself first. Learn, to look in the mirror and really learn what self-love is. And then you won't go through life wanting the opinions of others all the time. You will have that kind of knowing of what you need to do. And for me, it's come later in life. But I wish I had this when I was younger. But maybe it is something that comes later. I don't know. And another thing, don't wait for perfection. Don't wait. A lot of women say, when I lose weight, I love myself then. When I get the size I want to be, or when I get the body I want, or when I have that job or that car or the house, I would then learn to love myself. And I think it's about, no, do it right now. Do it now. Learn it now. I can always remember when I was young, when I was in my 20s, I was never enough. And I was always needed to lose half a stone. So I never learned to really love what I had. And now, in my late 50s, I look back at photos then, and I'm like, oh my gosh, what was I complaining about? I looked amazing. And I would do anything to have that body now, and I don't have it. But I would just say, don't wait to achieve what you think you want before you learn to love yourself. Do it now. Be the woman that you want to be.
Radio Glamorgan.
International Women's Day is a day when we celebrate the strength, resilience and achievements of women around the world, and a day which reminds us of the importance of advocating for equality every day. One of the students I teach on the MA in Visual Journalism at the University of South Wales made her home in Wales after fleeing from Afghanistan. Her name is Tamana, and this is her story.
So I am originally from Afghanistan. I moved to Wales 16 years ago, and so because I was born in a country with war, it was not safe to live there anymore. So my family and I traveled through India, Pakistan, Iran, and then I ended up here. I'm also married and I have 3 children, but I'm lucky enough in the sense that I could study and get educated further in my life. So I chose visual journalism because I love telling stories, and visual journalism is a very creative way of telling people's story, the people who has no voice to be heard. It's very difficult to, you have to be able to juggle so many things at the same time, but I feel very passionate about what I want to do in future, and I always feel if I do good in life, I would be a role model for my children to look up to. And as a woman, I feel very fortunate and very lucky to be able to have a family and also to be pursue my education and my career. Not many women has this chance, and if we talk about internationally, back home in my country, women are oppressed and their rights are being taken from them. So yeah, we are celebrating International Women's Day all over the world, but there are so many struggles that women has to face in day-to-day life, and particularly in education, because the mentality is once you have a child or 2 or 3, that's it, your life's meaning is just to bring those children up and make them, future generation, where I think that woman has the power to go through all the challenges, and International Women's Day is a message to bring equality and empowerment for all the women around the world. To tell them that never give up, no matter how difficult it is, if you want to achieve something, you will at the end of the day.
And as we heard from Tamana's story, so many women across the world and even in the UK are forced to live lives that are restrictive, and these women are seen and treated as though they're less than. Here's my friend Liz Perkins, a journalist who's used her position to shine a light on some of the great injustices of this age.
I broke the story on sexism and misogyny in the Welsh Rugby Union in the Daily Mail. What advice would I give my younger self? Wow, so much, honestly. I would suggest that I would go to Oxford sooner. My school teacher told me that basically I should go. And really, that turned out to be a total game changer for me and opened so many doors. Network like mad. The more people you know, the more chances you get. Be more visible. By sharing what I do on social media, I got a bigger following. And again, more opportunities came my way. Say yes to everything, because you never know where life is going to take you. And live life fast and don't stay too long, because obviously you never know how much time you're going to have, and you've really got to make the most of it, because time is the most precious thing that we've got.
You're listening to Radio Glamorgan.
I mentioned Sarah Starling to you earlier in the podcast. Sarah is a voiceover artist, a dog mum, and a thoroughly decent human being. And she would be if she's a dog mum, wouldn't she? Sarah was a colleague of mine at BBC Wales. She's now a successful businesswoman who regularly shares pearls of wisdom on her social channels, as well as voicing all manner of audio for companies and organisations. Here she is, sharing her thoughts on International Women's Day.
Do we really still need International Women's Day? Yeah, we do. We do. I mean, my career started 36 years ago, and I have had to push back time and time again. And yes, things have changed. There was a time when women didn't voice commercials for cars. They didn't voice trailers for films. That shifted, thank goodness. But there have also been points along the way where I have had to prove people wrong. So, way back at the end of my drama degree, I was told again and again that I would never get into the BBC. It goes one of two ways when somebody says that. And this is kind of advice for life, really. Either you crumple and you give in and you think, oh, I can't. Or it puts fire in your belly. And that's what I allowed it to do for me. At a careers fair in my final year at uni, I went to the stand for the BBC. And I spoke to a couple of guys in suits and ties. And I said that I wanted to work for the BBC and this is what I've been doing. And these are the kinds of things I was thinking of doing. And they said, oh, your best route in is via the typing pool. And I smiled and I thought to myself, no, no. And thankfully I had a brilliant guy who was helping out on my course. And he saw my love of audio and my love of sound and voice. And he encouraged me to apply to be a studio manager in radio or a sound engineer, if you like. And that's exactly what I went to do for the first 5 years of my career before I switched to the other side of the mic. In fact, I had the letter from the BBC the day I sat my finals. And to have proved all of those people wrong, careers advisors at university, the guys at the careers fair, teachers at school who'd said, no, you'll never, quite often men, felt great. And in fairness to the people who recruited me, on my original studio manager's course, there were 15 of us, only 3 were men, the rest of us were women. So there was a genuine attempt to redress the balance. I have had incidents during my career. In my early 20s, I was working on a sports programme at Broadcasting House in London. And I will never forget the presenter picking up the phone and complaining to the office, saying, there's a little girl at the desk to put my programme to air, because my senior colleague hadn't arrived on time. And I was perfectly capable of putting his programme on air, and that is what I did. There are numerous incidents along the way. When I was a TV and radio announcer, I was encouraged to lower my voice. The thinking is deeper voices are more trustworthy. And obviously, male voices are generally deeper than women's, so that's very ingrained in our society. Interestingly, women's voices tend to deepen with age, whereas men's voices tend to do the opposite. And as a voiceover, I remember a job, I think it was for a plumbing company, and the client had used a male voiceover, and they weren't happy with it. And the guy I was working with said, "Oh, this company don't usually use women." And he seemed a bit uncertain. But actually, they were blown away. And it was like, yeah, women can voice this stuff. We need taps. Women can even be plumbers, My advice to you is to know when to push back. And I have pushed back at times also when I have discovered that my salary has been significantly lower than my male counterparts. Knowing when to push back and to be politely vocal, and knowing when to smile sweetly, to internalise, to allow that to put fire in your belly to push you forwards. That's the key, really, I think, is knowing when to push and how to push. The fact is, we're all human, and we all have just as much right to stand on this earth, to take up space as each other. You only have to listen to the news or do a bit of research online to know that we are not there yet. Some countries are further ahead than others, some are going backwards, but we are most definitely not there yet.
I wonder how many of you have recognised her voice. Many, I'm sure. Those dulcet tones pop up everywhere. Thank you so much for your wise words, Sarah. Well, that's just about it from me. This podcast was produced in recognition and in celebration of International Women's Day. But this isn't about a day on a calendar. The stories and the messages I've been able to share with you today, thanks to some amazing women, are relevant every day. There's still plenty of work to be done, but as we've heard, there are trailblazers everywhere, and if we can see them, we can be them. Here's to acknowledging our responsibility to keep the momentum going by protecting what's been hard won, championing the voices already out there, and creating more opportunities for those who still need to be seen and heard.
Radio Glamorgan.